Good day everyone! Another day, another vlog. For today's video, we will be learning about what is culture, its meaning, characteristic, and its function. This is Shane D. Abalos once again, and without further ado, let's get started. So what is culture? Sometimes an individual is described as a highly cultured person, meaning that the person in question has certain features such as his speech, manner, and taste for literature, music, or painting, which distinguish him from others. Culture in this sense refers to the certain personal characteristic of an individual. Culture sometimes is used in popular discourse to refer a celebration or an evening for entertainment, as when one speaks as a culture show. Culture is identified with aesthetic and fine arts such as dance, music, or drama. Culture also is used in a special sense as anthropology and sociology. It refers to the sum of human beings' life ways, their behavior, beliefs, feelings, thought, that it connotes everything that is required by them as social being. So let's define culture according to: first, Edward Taylor. He defines culture as the complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, arts, morals, law, customs, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by a man as a member of society. Second, Malinowski. Malinowski defines culture as the handiwork of man and the medium through which he achieves his end. Malinowski also included inherited artifacts, implements, and consumer goods and social structure within his definition of society. Third is E. A. Hobel. Culture is a sum total of integrated learned behavior patterns, which are characteristic of a member of a society and which are therefore not the result of biological inheritance. Next is Robert Bierstedt. Robert Bierstedt defines culture as a complex whole that consists of everything we think and do and have as a member of society. Next is Max Weber. He defines culture as the expression of our nature in our modes of living and our thinking. Next is Anderson and Parker. They define culture as the total content of the physiosocial, biosocial, and the psychosocial universe. So here are the characteristics of a culture. First, culture is learned behaviors. Not all behavior is learned, but most of it is learned. Combing one's hair, standing in line, telling jokes, criticizing the president, and going to the movies are all constitute behavior which had to be learned. No one is born with an inherent understanding of their culture. They must learn as they grow. Second, culture is abstract. Culture exists in the minds or habits of the members of a society. Culture is the shared ways of doing and thinking. There are degrees of visibility of cultural behavior ranging from the regularized activities of a person to their internal reasons for doing so. In other words, we cannot see culture as such, we can only see human behavior. This behavior occurs in regular, patterned fashion, and it's called culture. Third, culture is a pattern of learned behavior. The definition of culture indicated that the learned behavior of a people is peer pattern. Each person's behavior often depends upon some particular behavior of someone else. The point is that, as a general rule, behavior are somewhat integrated or organized with the related behavior of other persons. The fourth one is culture is the product of behavior. Culture learnings are the product of behavior. As the person behaves, there occur changes in him. He acquires the ability to swim, to feel hatred towards someone, or to sympathize with someone. They have grown out of his previous behavior. So culture learnings are the product of behavior. As the person behaves and there are changes in him. The fifth is culture includes attitude and values knowledge. There is widespread error in thinking of many people who tend to regard ideas, attitude, and notion which they have as their own. It is easy to underestimate the uniqueness of one's attitude and idea. When there is agreement with other people, it's largely unnoticed. But when there is a disagreement or difference, one's usually conscious of it. Your differences, however, may also be cultural. For example, suppose you are a Catholic and the other person is Protestant. Next is culture also includes material object. Man's behavior results in creating object. Men are behaving when they made these things. To make this object required numerous and various skills which human beings gradually built up through the ages. Man has invented something else and so on. Occasionally, one encounters the view that the man does not really make or steal or any battleship. All of these things first existed as a state of nature. The next characteristic of a culture is shared by the members of the society. The patterns of learned behavior and the result of behavior are possessed not only by a person or a few persons, but usually by a large proportion. Thus, many millions of persons shared such behavior patterns as Christianity, the use of automobiles, and the English language. For example, as Americans do the Christian religion, to some persons Christianity is the all-important, predominating idea in life. To others, it is less preoccupying or important, and to still other, it is of the marginal significance only. Next characteristic is culture is super-organic. Culture is sometimes called super-organic. It implies that culture is somehow superior to nature. The word super-organic is useful when it implies that may be quite a different phenomenon from a cultural point of view. For example, a tree means different things to the botanist who studies it, the old woman who uses it for shade in the late summer afternoon, the farmer who picks it as a fruit, the motorist who collides with it, and the young lovers who carve their initial in its trunk. The ninth characteristic of a culture is a pervasive. Culture is a pervasive. It touches every aspect of life. The pervasiveness of a culture is manifest in two ways. First, culture provides an unquestioned context within which individual action and response takes place. Second, culture pervades social activities and institutions. According to Ruth Benedict, a culture, like an individual, is a more or less consistent pattern of thought and action, which culture there come into being characteristic purposes not necessarily shared by other types of society. Next is culture is a way of life. Culture means simply the way of life of a people or theirs designed for living. A culture is a historically derived system of explicit and implicit design for living, which tends to be shared by all and specially designed members of a group. 11th characteristic is that culture is a human product. Culture is not a force operating by itself and independent of the human actors. There is an unconscious tendency to defy culture, to endow it with life, and treat it as a thing. Culture is a creation of society and interaction and depends for its existence upon the continuance of a society. The 12th characteristic of a culture is that culture is idealistic. Culture embodies the ideas of norms of a group. It is the sum total of the ideal patterns and norms of a behavior of a group. Culture consists of the intellectual, artistic, and social ideal and institution which the member of the society profess and to which they strive to conform. Next characteristic is that culture is transmitted among members of a society. The cultural ways are learned by persons from persons. Many of them are handed down by one's elders, by parents, teachers, and other or somewhat older generation. For example, the style of address, political views, the use of recent labor-saving devices. One does not acquire a behavior pattern spontaneously. He learns from it. The next characteristic of a culture is that culture is continually changing. There is one fundamental and inescapable attribute of a culture, the fact of unending change. Some society at sometimes change slowly and hence in comparison to other societies seems not to be changing at all, but they are changing even though not obviously so. The next characteristic of a culture is variable. Culture varies from society to society, group to group, hence we say culture of India or England. Further, culture varies from group to group within the same society. They are subculture within a culture. Cluster of patterns which are both related to general culture of a society and yet distinguishable from it are called subculture. The next characteristic of a culture is that culture is an integrated system. Culture possesses an order and system. Its various parts are integrated with each other, and any element which is introduced is also integrated. And last characteristic, language is the chief vehicle of a culture. Man lives not only in the present but also in the past and future. He is able to do this because he possesses language which transmit to him what was learned in the past and enables him to transmit the accumulated wisdom to the next generation. To conclude, culture is everything with it's socially learned and shared by the members of a society. It is culture that, in the wide focus of the world, distinguishes individual from individual, group from group, and society. Let us now go to the function of a culture. Culture has certain functions for both individual and society. First function of a culture defines situation. Each culture has a subtle cues which define each situation. It reveals whether one should prepare to fight, run, laugh, or make love. For example, suppose someone approaches you with the right hand outstretched at waist level. What does this mean? That he wishes to shake hand in friendly greeting is perfectly obvious. That is to anyone familiar with one culture. But in other place or time, the outstretched hand might mean hostility or warning. Second function of a culture is that culture defines attitude, values, and goals. Each person learns in his culture what is good, true, and beautiful. Attitude, values, and goals are defined by the culture, while the individual normally learns them as unconsciously as he learns the language. Attitude are the tendencies to feel and act in a certain ways, while values are measured as a goodness or desirability. For example, we value private property, the government representatives, and many other things and experience. The third function of a culture is defines myth, legend, and supernatural. Myth and legend are important part of every culture. They may inspire, reinforce effort and sacrifice, and bring comfort in bereavement. Whether they are true is sociological unimportant. Ghosts are real to people who believe in them and who act upon this belief. The last function of a culture is that culture provides behavior patterns. The individual need not to go through painful trial and error learning to know what foods can be eaten or how to live among people without fear. He finds a ready-made set of patterns awaiting him which he needs only to learn and follow. If men use culture to advance their purposes, it seems clear also that a culture imposes limits on human activities. Now let us know what is the relationship between the culture and the society. The relationship between society, culture, and personality is stressed by Ralph Linton. He believes that a society is an organized group of individuals. A culture is an organized group of learned responses, while the individual is a living organism capable of independent thought, feeling, and action, but with his independence limited and his resources profoundly modified by contact with the society and culture in which he develops. A society cannot exist apart from culture, because culture is always made for person and their groupings. People carry and transmit culture, but they are not culture. No culture can exist except as it embodied in the society of a man. No society can operate without cultural derivatives like matter and energy, like mind and body. They are independent and yet interacting expresses different aspects of a human situation. One must always keep in mind that the interdependence and the reciprocal relationship between culture and society. Each is distinguishable concept in which the patterning and the organization of the whole is more important than any of the components part. I think that is all for my report, and I hope you have learned something out from it. Thank you for listening, and God bless us all.